Reviving William Liddell's Damask Designs is a project that began with the recovery of 1,600 photographic glass plates, discovered during the dismantling of the Ewart-Liddell factory at Donacloney, County Down, Ireland. This project has been developed by Barbara Das and myself, Trish Belford. The Liddell Company was set up in 1866 at a time when Ireland was the largest linen producing country in the world. The collection contains designs produced for a worldwide clientele. The archive captures all stages of the design process, from the original artist's sketches, highly skilled drafted designs, technical information for the weaving process, and a few woven proof cloths. A key aspect of the project was the production of contemporary textile work, designed and developed in response to this rich archive. We responded to the collection from the perspective of our creative practices, print and weave. The outcomes of this work were shown at the Irish Linen Centre Linen Museum as part of the first Northern Ireland Linen Biennale. This body of work, along with the archive, is captured in a series of 7 folio books, designed by Paul Kelly and presented in a beautifully crafted modular exhibition.
The plates have captured not just the designs, but the design process in the design office from the late 19th century right through to the 70s, which is pre-digital, and that's amazing because you've got all of the process of the information coming into the office, the designer brief, and sometimes that was captured in a little bit of an envelope with a few little notes taken down by the designer about what the client wanted. Through to the initial designer sketches, quite detailed and highly skilled drafted drawings of typography and of images and logos, through to the very large scale point paper designs, which would be enormous, which are instructions for the weaving of the cloth and the loom. And there were also images of proof cloth as well, which is the first woven cloth of the design to check for faults. It was very hard to see what was on these plates because of their condition. So we felt the first thing to do was to get them digitized in a really good quality image. And we collaborated with a company to do that. And every single one of them was digitized. So it wasn't until we actually saw those images that we realized the quality and the extent of the archive and what it was holding, and the detail as well, because you can zoom right into the big point paper designs and you can see detailed structures and interlacing. So that's quite an amazing sort of capacity to see that sort of detail of work.
Not only are the designs from the whole collection on the website, as part of this project there was 3 roadshows throughout Northern Ireland, because we not only wanted to capture the information and the design information about the plates, but we actually wanted to call in the general public, because there was thousands of people in Northern Ireland had worked in the linen industry. So we had 3 roadshows where we invited the general public to come in and bring information all about linen in Northern Ireland and in Ireland. The first one was in Kiltraw, which would be a natural place to have it, which was the Ulster Folk Museum. And some beautiful documentation came in, and it just really showed the reach of how Irish linen had travelled across the world. There's documentation from Damask for Dignity, which was a publication that was created in the United States. And this was a great gathering of people. So we were just hoping to gather information, but we also brought together people from the community who talked again. And in particular, the great fun one and the most exciting one was in Donacloney, which was where William Liddell had his original factory. So we were really superfluous to that. Lots of the community came in. They brought newspaper cuttings, and they were all chatting and talking about the good old times that they enjoyed. So all of that information is also gathered and on the website. So it sort of supports the William Liddell glass plates with a very rich background to what was happening in Ireland on relating to the linen industry. This is why the digitisation of it is so important. And you know, it's on a website, it's there. We want other people, other designers or historians or academics to be inspired and to use the archive. I mean, Barbara and I were very keen at the very beginning of the project that we would use the designs to inspire new work. So that was our end aim, but we went through all of this massive heritage, and that's right, the end work would not have been as rich had we not done all this development.
One of the interesting things about that visit to Donacloney was that we were hoping to find out a little bit more about why this collection existed, who took the photographs and why, because it wasn't normal design practice, and that's still a mystery.
From a graphic design perspective, the archive's fascinating because of the breadth and depth of the work that's there. These are very much business-driven archives that show the interaction between the linen industry and worldwide clientele. And when the world was a much bigger place and much more difficult to get analog artwork and conversations back and forth between clients and businesses, and for everybody to get what they need. So actually, when you look through the archive, it's a treasure trove for a contemporary graphic design eye, because it shows the entirety of the development process of brand identity, as we would call it now. We can literally watch in the plates a brand development for Ritz-Carlton. How what we would consider a very digital, clean process now is very much a hands-on draftsperson's development through drawings, and the drawings get more and more refined. They are using different elements that get patched in from Boston, from Singapore, from Philadelphia, and it really tells the story of the relationship between Liddell and their client and their businesses all over the world. So when you think about the interactions that are needed to make that happen, it's very impressive. Viewing the collaborative approach of so many different people, they wouldn't have been called graphic designers at that time, but they would have been drafts people, they would have been part of a longer process. It's really interesting to pick up on the points of the binary, digital, almost digital approach that's done in an analog manner. And then to see these old physical plates scanned and digitized and made available on a website now, that in itself is a kind of nice circular approach to how this could be a resource that designers are able to get lost in and find beautiful elements that they can bring to life again. And then in terms of the exhibition, make sure that we're using industrial type classical serifs and combining all the different elements in the same way that the archive shows itself, and hopefully that sits well in a contemporary perspective.
So 4 key categories. One was organisations, and that included things like hospitals, universities, businesses, clubs, banks, you know, all sorts of things. Athletic clubs, and some of these were quite old designs, so they were clearly coming from the late 19th, earlier 20th century, and some more newer ones like TWA and things like that. Universities were mainly from the United States, and also military clientele as well, where we had the United States of America Department of the Navy. We also had military ones as well, and we had a lovely one from, our only Irish one was from the Irish Armed Forces, which was a beautifully drawn logo as well. So that was the sort of clubs and businesses. We then had logistics, which are really train lines, shipping lines, and airplanes, airlines. And again, this is a very rich history from early 20th century. from the Cunard White Star line, a lot of Canadian, American lines as well. So that's the other category. Then hospitality is hotels, cafes, restaurants. And all of these are businesses that wanted to have Irish linen. It was a status symbol from the Liddell factory. And so you'd had napkin designs, tablecloth designs, towel designs, all beautifully drawn. And the final category would be the domestic market. And I think that's what most people are really familiar with, the range of designs that they may well have in their own homes, of florals, of geometric designs. But we find quite unusual designs, quite modern ones, and a couple of very nice Celtic designs, which are quite unusual, believe it or not, and lots of florals, chrysanthemums, lily of the valley, tulips, all sorts of the ones that we are more familiar with, I would say, in our own homes. So that's the main categories that we discovered, and then we just pulled the plates together and that, and the books were designed around those categories.
We both come from textile backgrounds, but they're quite diverse in themselves. I would be screen printer or textile printing, and Barbara would be a weaver. And within those disciplines, they're very different. Weaving is sort of probably a lot more methodical and thought out, whereas printing tends to be a little bit more instant. So it was quite interesting about how we decided to work together. And we also worked together and we worked separately. But I think probably one of the most successful or the most interesting pieces of work that we did together collaboratively was taken from, it was actually, I call it the pineapple. It was this plate, and we independently selected that plate and decided that we would sort of produce a piece of work that would involve printing and weaving. So I would work within my discipline and dyed up some yarns that would be dischargeable, or it's a bleaching process, and Barbara within her discipline wove lots of different structures into it. Neither of us really knew what we were going to reveal from the process, but in this book, which is the beautiful sample book, we've got samples of how these fabrics actually work together, and it was woven as one long piece. So, but what's really unique about this, these samples or fabrics could not have been created by one single process. We had to have the weaving, which had to mirror the printing, which had to mirror the discharging, which had to mirror the blending together of the two processes. So that was a lovely body of work, and perhaps, and the great thing about working collaboratively when you respect and trust the other discipline is you get on with your own little bit and then just understand that there's going to be something different that you wouldn't have expected coming, and that's exactly what's happened with that. Within the print experimentation, I was interested in looking at actually taking one of the plates, and working with William Clark, we digitized it, and so we created a complete digital print from that. Now that wouldn't necessarily be a way I would normally work, so to correspond to that, also did some very bold screen prints. And interestingly, again, Barbara and I worked independently. These little images were flicked between each other through WhatsApp, believe it or not. So I was creating very, very simple prints, but Barbara was also creating some very simple, beautiful weaves. So these are both from the same design, but a completely different outlook and a completely different pattern. And the simplicity of this worked very nicely with the others. And then Barbara, I think you did some very beautiful, complex weaves working with your own discipline. So they all hang together as a group, but we work within our own disciplines and together.
As a weaver, obviously, I was most interested in the structural aspect of that, in what I would call the DNA of the cloth. So I would strip it right back down, not to the patterns, but to the structures that actually make the pattern possible. Because the pattern in Irish linen isn't generated from a print process, but from the contrast between warp and weft-faced weaves. And most people don't look at it in that detail. They see it from the perspective of the pattern. But I sort of ignored the pattern and went right down into that DNA, which I love, and that's that structure and the structural differences. And some of the plates are of the big, very big point paper instructions that would have been made for the cards to be punched for the jacquard looms. So it's at that level that I was interested in those little tiny structures that create that sort of difference. And the difference is created by light really reflecting off whether it's the direction is warp or weft in the weave. So when you look at the work that I was concerned with, it was at that level, that microscopic level of the structure, and really bringing that out to celebrate that. So the red pieces, the samples there, what I did in terms of research for that was I looked at one design and I extracted all of the structural patterns that I could from that. And then I began to create these simple squares which had the front and the back side of that fabric. And that really enhances that understanding of the difference between the percentage really of whether it's warp or weft on the surface of the fabric, and that's the key element of design for damask weaving. And I created this sort of panel of red squares. The other aspect was, again, looking at bringing out that even more and using paper weaves. Very simple technique, just to look at the structure and to celebrate that structure. And that's what Trish was talking about, led to her then collaborating with me with the paper weaves that I had constructed. I think it's really good for audiences to see the different approaches that we take, and that's all recorded in these project books, because we are very opposite in the way we work. Obviously I at a microscopic level, and you've taken it at a more pattern level really. So that's a good in terms of a model of practice, or different models of practice. But for everyone out there, all of these patterns are there for inspiration to be used. They're accessible, and we would just love, and we love to see people looking at those patterns and using them for whatever practice that they have. It doesn't have to be print or weave or textile oriented. It can be any sort of creative practice that these designs, and also the process that is evident there, can inspire in other people.
I mean, the first steps to that is the Donacloney collection, which was created by William Clark last season, which is available on their website, and it is a commercial proposition. You know, it's available commercially, but there are, you know, the website's there, and so there are many opportunities for, you know, historians, academics, artists, designers, and I mean the website's a very rich source of inspiration. And actually, in fact, we like to hear if somebody has or been inspired by it, because it just builds up this.
Yeah. And the plates themselves are in Lisburn, the Irish Linen Centre in the Lisburn Museum. So again, if you are an academic or a historian and you actually want to go and see the plates, they're there for you as well. So we've really brought everything out for people to have a look at, and really want as many different types of disciplines and practices to make use of this wonderful Irish heritage.